Yeah, so presidential candidate and senator and self-proclaimed democratic socialist Bernie Sanders has revealed his climate and energy plan called the Green New Deal, which is a common theme, of course, among Democrats this election cycle. And as expected, it's a pretty progressive, eco-left utopian plan, of which we had several, but this is very ambitious. So he starts out with a lot of rhetoric about the greedy billionaires and the criminal fossil fuel industry, and how he wants to change and overhaul the entire system. And as a justification, he calls the climate issue a climate emergency, and citing the recent Greenland surface melt and the Amazon fires, interestingly, both of which didn't have much to do with climate change overall, but this is a kind of event that he uses as a hook for his urgent policy. And so over the next 11 years in this plan, allegedly the science tells us that we need to act quickly and reduce our CO2 emissions to prevent the climate catastrophe. And this, of course, is then the unchallenged radical rhetoric that is now standard policy, at least on the Democratic side of things. And so some of the goals in the plan are 100% renewable energy, of course, for electricity and transport, no later than 2030, which is quite ambitious, if not impossible, even with a good policy, but I don't think this one will come close to that. And in addition, of course, because this is Bernie Sanders, which this will be provided by a state-owned energy utility. So in an interview with MSNBC, Senator Sanders also mentioned the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was established in the 1930s and is a federally owned utility, and it also provides some other services in Tennessee. And this is, for him, this is a raw model of how we should run the entire energy system for electric power and transportation. And another goal is zero carbon emissions on net by 2050 at the latest. He wants to create 20 million new jobs in all kinds of venues with this. You know, this is a standard narrative about the alleged green jobs that will come up when just from switching from the traditional, fossil fuels, nuclear, and so on, just to solar, wind, and in his case, especially geothermal as well. Overall, 16.3 trillion investments, as it's called, in sort of a World War II style effort in mobilization of the national economy over the next 11 years. Then declaring formally climate change as a national emergency, and internationally spending money on a climate fund and rejoining the Paris Agreement. Now, listeners to Power Hour, of course, know that spending some 200 billion, something like that, on a climate fund internationally and rejoining the Paris Agreement will not do anything, because most of the future emissions will come from developing countries, in particularly in Africa and Asia, and they are not committed to anything in the Paris Accords as of now. So here are two quotes from the climate plan by Bernie Sanders. The first quote is, "To get our goal of 100% sustainable energy, we will not rely on any false solutions like nuclear, geoengineering, carbon capture and sequestration, or trash incinerators." So notably, nuclear, the one big technology that could help with this goal, is excluded by Bernie Sanders. And then another quote from the Green New Deal by Bernie Sanders: "We will invest in nationwide electric vehicle charging infrastructure to increase access to these resources for all, just as we built an interstate highway system in the 1950s and 1960s. So this is where this is going. Transportation, of course, will be electrified. Battery electric vehicles will be in this state-run effort, be the dominating technology for transport, and it's let's just say it's at least an order of magnitude more difficult than building an interstate highway system. And in 11 years, it's technically impossible. But then if you think this is like a very, well, ambitious is an understatement. This is an impossible plan. Now it gets even better, because according to the Green New Deal plan, this plan will pay for itself. And here are a couple of points that I noted down how this is going to happen. So by making the fossil fuel industry pay, generating profits from the state utility, reducing military spending for oil. So allegedly there's a lot of spending from the military just to secure our energy and oil interests. Then collecting taxes from the 20 million new jobs and saving social safety programs because of less unemployment, because these 20 million additional jobs will end unemployment for all. And then making the wealthy and large corporations pay their fair share, which is, in every program by Bernie Sanders, I think. Now this is a lot of economic acrobatics here, because so Bernie Sanders wants to bankrupt the fossil fuel industry and all the large corporations apparently, and then taxing them as well to pay for the new system, and destroying all the profits in the current energy system, and then but just generate the same type of profits in a state utility. So this is very interesting, because you might want to look at places like Venezuela to see what happens when you just try to nationalize the oil industry alone. This is far more ambitious. Is trying to, just within about a decade, just overhaul the entire energy system, which grew in America over many decades since World War II. This is very, very ambitious, and so there's a lot of, to my understanding, there's a lot of double counting in this. Just we'll make the fossil fuel industry pay while it's bankrupt. This is probably not going to happen, because if you don't allow the fossil fuel industry to generate any profits, how are you going to tax them for your ambitious $16.3 trillion program, right? And of course, getting more revenue from the jobs that the government will provide in the state utility and other investments. This seems like a perpetuum mobile in economics. You just get a state or government program, and then you tax the people to finance it. The same people that work in the government program. That doesn't seem like a good start. So if that was possible, the Soviet Union, dominate the planet probably. And everyone in the process, of course, will save money. So you will save on electricity bills, because Bernie Sanders knows a cheaper way to generate electric power compared to the greedy capitalists, of course. And it's not, so there are lengthy passages of this that I haven't read entirely, but all of these programs make no sense, because they run apparently on the assumption that somehow a government program or a government monopoly in the marketplace will somehow find a way to make things differently than it is now, and at the same time much cheaper and more efficiently. And this doesn't really fly for me. But of course, you have to give the Green New Deal plan this much. It actually has a better chance of massively reducing American CO2 emissions than other plans, because this would actually wreck the economy for good. And if you get much poorer, of course you have a lower carbon footprint and a lower footprint than anything else. So this has the potential to reduce the American per capita CO2 footprint significantly, simply by making Americans poor. And that's really all that it boils down to.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one sense in which this is truly ambitious, because, like, even if you take America's CO2 down to virtually zero because there's virtually zero economic activity, like that still does not change the trajectory of the world. And so the sense in which this is ambitious is solely in that it's ambitious in terms of how much power Sanders wants to take on his part. And I do think that there's a temptation to like not take something like this seriously, but I think it should be taken very seriously. Like this is a serious plan put forward by somebody who has a non-trivial chance of becoming president of the United States. And part of taking it seriously means recognizing that the insane price tag will not actually be an impediment if people accept that this is a moral action. And even more than that, I think like if you see a totalitarian plan that wants total government control over the economy and your reaction is, well, the price is too high, like you've missed the boat. Like this is literally dictatorial and the costs aren't, some, this is a $16 trillion plan that could potentially pay for itself or that would involve a lot of debt. No, the cost is having a civilized, advanced economy, to say nothing of a even semi-free economy.